We have another young Indian with us today as part of the Voice of the Young segment. Hello, everyone. Good to be back. Today we have with us Pavan Kumar. Let's listen to him. Over to you, Pavan.
Good evening, everybody who's watching this. Good evening, Dr. Mathu, for taking up this initiative. And I think I must say, it's something that most young economists would be very eager to hear, because that's something everybody always wanted to talk about and about their experiences. So when it comes to my story, I did my graduation from the Symbiosis School of Economics in Pune between 2016 and 2019. I graduated from there with a fairly decent grade and moved on to my master's in economics with a specialization in urban, which I never expected to do, from the University of Hyderabad later in 2019. And as fate would have it, COVID stuck, and the batch was like just in the interim was just disrupted. The learning was disrupted for a few months, but I was not ready to take that on, and then I decided, okay, let me do something about this pandemic and this period. So in that period, I was always already interested in writing pieces and mostly focusing on cities, for a very simple reason that we all now live in cities. You can't just escape the city landscape, whether somebody's in the US or in India or in Japan. It's just a standard place of living now. And there's a lot that cities need to be doing. So in the period during my master's, I developed an interest in land economics, where I took it up further and sort of made it more important for my own studies and research, that I took it up and then more majored in urban economics under the guidance of somebody who is most known in India, Dr. P.K. Mohanty, who was earlier the JNNURM director and then the last chief secretary of the United Andhra Pradesh. So taking courses under him and learning about the urban sector and what needs to be done was something that really sort of made me realize that my calling lies in trying to study the cities more. So, and from taking on from there, I thought I would, once I graduated in 21, and after that, I was associated with quite a few organizations, such as Nikore Associates, based out of Delhi, and the Center for Economic and Social Studies in Hyderabad, which is a partly government think tank and also has independent research interests. So under them, I took up projects with studying projects about infrastructure projects pertaining to women, and then generally the kind of infrastructure that you would see in developing countries. So how they operate and what is their importance in the society. I was analyzing those, and then I came to transport, where I found that the urban transport is something that most people look at it only from the perspective of planning or political, augmenting it through political support, and beyond that, it's just stuck there. Beyond that, there's nothing much. As economists, we don't really study it much in India. Outside India, there is quite some interest in studying it from the economic lens. But India is still at a nascent stage, and there's a lot of the progress is still, it needs much more progress in studying cities from the economic lens. So I took up my research interest as a research project for a short term with the CES in Hyderabad, where I studied the bus transport system in Hyderabad for a bit and compared it with how it was faring with in cities like Bangalore, Bombay, Pune, and Delhi, which have a significant.
Let's hear. What did you find? I'm curious.
So there are two things. So one is the financial models that most of these bus systems follow. So that is one takeaway there. And the second takeaway is what can be done later. So is there anything that can be done, or is there anything that needs to be more research in depth, and then we need to do something about it. So the first finding is with respect to the financial models. This is very interesting because everybody talks about buses being part of the government, and under that you have all these RTC corporations that they run, which have a lot of money. And now we are seeing a lot of investment in terms of electronic buses, electric vehicles, electric buses being normed under the government program.
Yeah.
So under that, if we look at it, the bus systems follow majorly three models in India when it comes to financing. Either they're directly under the state government, or it is a public-private partnership where a certain amount of control is exercised by the state government through an SPV, or it is a standalone. Cities do not manage it on their own. The state government runs the whole system. So it's a it can be bifurcated into three divisions, kind of bus systems we have. But what is the problem with these? So when it comes to cities are a dynamic set on their own. So whether they have a state government controlling the bus systems or not is a different matter. But it certainly affects it in a certain way that the bus when there is a need for cities to build more build on the bus system, then they are not able to do it. So if we look at it, why? Because it boils down to the financial model that they have, and they are not ready to because the decentralization being a problem for people in India. At least despite the law saying that, the reality is quite different, quite stark. So the cities are not able to handle their own transport systems well. And that is a major finding that has been observed in my study. And particularly in Hyderabad, because now after Bangalore, it's the next big IT hub in India. So for such a city, we all see a lot of this crowding in metro. And incidentally, unlike most cities, the metro system has just 3 coaches per train, even after 6 years of launch. And people just crowd in it like almost 4 to 5 lakhs per day. And it's just impossible to travel at peak time at a comfortable pace.
Yeah.
So for that, the alternative is to look at buses. And for that, there's not enough buses in the city, and the buses shortfall. So I explored why this was the case. And that came down to the fact that the state government controls it as a separate entity, but they do not put much of money in the buses. And rather, the money goes into either paying the salaries or the previous financial burden that they had carried on, these kind of things. So nothing new in terms of capital to augment the bus systems. And it's mostly, if they take buses, it's only on lease. So they don't have anything on their own. It's either they take electric buses from on lease from Tata or Electra or these kind of firms, and they do not really do much. So following up on this, what my conclusion was that there are several avenues open for them when it comes to we have to sort of think out of the box as to how to augment the bus system.
Yeah.
So the one option is that from cities like Ahmedabad and which has the Janmat PRTS, which they launched quite some time ago, almost a decade ago. So from that, the experience has been that certain routes can be, the routes, the way the buses ply their routes, and that kind of thing has to be more rationalized and looked at from the perspective of the users, than just looking at it from the perspective of profits and all. So the way they operate is very different, and they have to sort of change that over time. And there's also a very big scouted project of the government that borrowing on from what is the experience has been in cities like Tokyo, Hong Kong, and Singapore, which is the transit-oriented development.
Yeah.
So under transit-oriented development, the idea right now is just that you develop housing, commercial space along the metro rail corridor.
Yeah.
But not so much on the bus system. If there was a proper bus corridor that was developed, like in Ahmedabad, there could be a case of exploring it, something similar in the bus system. And that would sort of mean that the RTC would have to, the regional transport corporations would have to scale up their land use and sort of discuss more on what could be done to improve the profit and not just look at that. So this was the two major findings from that.
Okay, so you're talking about bus rapid transit, right?
Exactly.
You're talking about BRT. Is that a success
Yes.
in Ahmedabad?
from my reading and from the kind of reports that I've seen and the whatever I have perused, in the initial stages, it was a problem because not many were ready to come out and take it. So the success is the way we measure. So on that front, the ridership wise, over time it has come down. But to an extent, in terms of managing it and timing, they still are uh, uh, sort of a standard. They're set a standard for other cities to follow. But
Okay.
when it comes to the kind of ridership that we see, that is still at a not a very good rate after the pandemic, particularly because everybody is interested in sort of just driving the car around the city.
Yeah. That's the
And
pandemic effect. That's in every part of the world. You don't see it just in India, you see it everywhere. That public transportation is down after the pandemic. Okay.
but then the mode of which the mode is varying. So we see it in Hyderabad or Bangalore, for instance, in the last couple of days, and even in Delhi, I believe, thanks to the G20 summit that was recently concluded, people started using them more. And so some sort of an external incentive or eccentric factor would pull them into using these things. So that is one finding that I found. And so moving on from there, so I sort of developed this interest in cities more and more over time. And then, despite all of these things, on the career front, there was some sort of stumbling blocks. Though I cleared my UGC net and then I missed the JRF, which people want for PhD, just by a very narrow 2 points so for the cutoff twice.
Yeah.
And that did set me back a little for some time, and I was not very keen on knowing what to do. So somehow I persisted in terms of trying to write papers or write articles and study my subject more effectively and sort of be more passionate, sort of not lose that chain, that trend in me. But somehow I veered on to pursue a role in TCS for a bit. So that came out in a very interesting way
Yeah, please.
that I did not envisage at all. So I was sort of waiting for these. No, in the interim, I also gave interview for IIM Calcutta, and that did not work out. And likewise for IIM Bangalore, but those both did not really materialize. So I decided that I would sort of let's give it a shot at TCS, which came about, which started hiring economists for banking and these kind of analysis, which requires higher level econometric analysis. I somehow got in there, and it was a very difficult test, I must say. But then I found the math and stat part to be quite easy than economics because it was quite interesting the way they put it. So I somehow worked in TCS for a bit, for about 8 to 9 months. But after that, somewhere it was the intuition was telling me that despite all the money and all these kind of things, there's a real purpose that I need to discover than just these kind of esoteric questions in terms of money and the general trend that we all follow in our 20s. So I somehow decided to take that plunge, and then I moved on from TCS, and then I got into something that was a mix of what I always loved, which was writing and data collection and manipulation, all of that. So I started working with this firm called IndiaSpend, which is based out of Bombay. This is a media firm, and it was supposed to be the first firm in India to news firm in India to sort of manage and collate and put out news based on data sets. So they collect data and they analyze and they put it as news stories.
Yeah.
So I got in there and I had been working with them for the last 6 months, and I took a break after that. So prior to telling everybody why I took that break, so the work at IndiaSpend was quite a very novel one for me because I'd always been trying to pull out data from XYZ sources, but I was also wanting to question what is the flaw in the data that we see and what are the problems and how do you address that.
Mm.
So as part of that exercise, as part of working with IndiaSpend, I sort of almost also wrote a few articles on the smart cities and why there are problems in the railways and railway derailments and how they sort of affect the society at large. And the articles are all available on my LinkedIn and my Twitter profile for people to see. So in these, when I'm analyzing all of these data sets, collecting them from the ministry and often asking the the ministry as to what is the problems and why are there sort of loopholes in the data set. So I sort of realized that to an extent, being a journalist comes with a responsibility. And I was always fascinated about the world of journalism from a data lens because I had done a course called economic journalism back in my graduation.
Yeah.
And part of that was and sort of making me wonder the way the data is collected in India has a lot of these flaws which do not get highlighted directly. So in my data in articles, I had pointed out that the data is collected this way, but there are also some other factors that influence the data. So
Mhm.
that, for instance, we look at the smart city data.
Yeah.
The smart cities data is only available at the aggregate level. In the
Yeah.
sense, it lists the number of cities, the number of projects they have, and how many are under progress and how many have been completed. But it does not really give us the breakup of what cities are doing what kind of projects.
Okay.
For that, you would have to go down and sort of ask the ministry or the city people who are managing the smart city mission in those cities. So these kind of things come about there. So that way, the experience was like really enriching for my passion, which is almost also writing.
Yeah.
I kind of write a lot, and I mean, to an extent, it's one way an economist can describe things
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
more lucid way for people.
Okay.
So
Good.
there was also one interesting anecdote I would like to share with the viewers and you, Dr. Mathur.
Yes.
So there was this instance when I was challenged by the kind of Oxford English that we see in books written by economists in the 1800s, 1900s, early 1900s. Then only when I went back to reading and sort of making notes from Samuelson's book, which is the Foundations of Economic Analysis, which is entirely math.
Yeah.
So that did not make sense to me at first. I realized that that is a more easier way to sort of describe it than in complex Victorian English. So
Yes.
I thought if I wanted to sort of talk to people in my locality or sort of in India, for instance, you need to write it in a way where it's much easier to
Yes.
talk or sort of convey it in a more better way.
Yeah.
So that hit a note in my head, and I thought, let me write a book.
Yeah.
But it's still a work in progress because of all the other things. But the idea that I'm trying to bring out to that book is that it's going to be a very short book, and it's still on the work. So the idea is to sort of tell people that economics is not just common sense, nor is it just what people in the news before the budget days we make it out to be. And it's much more in terms of not just maths, but it's also having a lot of abstractness built into it. Because, for instance, let's take the example we just used. So we were discussing how buses are not, the public transport suddenly saw a dip after pandemic. But what would explain that behavior from the people? Is it
Yeah.
just dealing with, it might also be because they saw a sort of a decline in their income, that they were not able to travel long or to go to long distances always at that rate that is prevailing for the transport system.
Yeah.
So a lot of these factors come into play. So that is something that's in work in progress. But I would love to tell the viewers that if you want to sort of make economics simpler, it's better to write it down and sort of analyze how you would see it and how a layman would see it.
Yeah.
And in
Okay.
India, that's something that is more, the economic literacy is something much like financial literacy that's going around these days. And the economic literacy is as important, I believe, and that's the effort that I'm trying to bring out soon. And I hope to complete it and put it out for you also in the first
Okay. Wonderful.
session.
I like the idea very much. Okay. I usually don't comment, but I like this one, so I'll say it. Yes. Good. All right. What's next for you? I mean, how are you
Uh,
sustaining yourself these days? I mean, you don't have a
so
proper job. So somebody would ask, so Pavan, how are you earning some money just from your writing or what?
Writing is precisely one thing because when I was working with IndiaSpend, I was earning a decent amount, and then based on that, I've been sustained. So I took a break for a simple reason that I realized, okay, now there is something more. I will need to sort of take a step back and analyze and go forward. So I would plan to do a PhD in urban economics from not just India is one option, but I'm also open to looking out abroad.
Yeah.
And on that, I'm sort of in that zone right now, and I've just given my GRE with a decent score,
Yeah.
and I would like to sort of take it forward after that. So that is my current in terms of sustenance. Thanks to Tata, which has helped a lot of other Indians also, not just in the tech world but non-tech like us. And kudos to the team of IndiaSpend, which is actually doing a lot of work. And I believe even economists should take note of what IndiaSpend is doing, because quite a lot of work is also oriented towards economic development, and people can actually express their ideas on that. And the other thing that I actually want to tell the viewers is that so there are certain ideas that we come about, right? So we have, one was my writing, and as part of my writing, I also sort of explored areas from finance to like in the case of bus system research, or in the case in economics, where I am trying to right now. I'm actually having a paper in the go. I'm actually working on a paper as well, where I'm trying to analyze. People are talking about city GDP to be measured from something that is very uniquely developed these days. This is the luminosity.
Yeah.
It is more like trying to analyze how much of a city's economic activity can be described from the night lights that we see.
Yeah.
And that was something we had even in the economic survey a few years ago, I believe.
Yes.
But there's a problem with that. In the sense, the way we have to estimate it. So GDP for a city is just a similar way we have to analyze. But when it comes to night light systems and analyzing that, we do a lot of these IT offices sort of keep on running their offices running, and then so who is actually switching on the lights at night?
Yeah.
That is the question there. And is it the IT people? And because of that, can we say it is the IT belt which is for the sort of contributing more to the city? For instance, a city, let's take it, or is it somebody else?
Yeah.
So that distinction cannot be drawn from the IT from the light data, and that is one thing that is a fallacy that people need to know.
Yeah.
And the question then comes about as to how else do you do it? So in my preliminary research, I found something very interesting, that the city GDP can also be measured from the kind of data that we have in India, for instance, from the kind of luxury cars or the cars that we buy, and the transport sales that we have. And based on that, we can approximate it to see if for a certain level of income, who are buying these cars. So based on that, if we sort of slowly extrapolate it to an extent, there is a chance that we might sort of find what could be the actual level of GDP that a city contributes.
Okay.
Or we can estimate it that way. I may be wrong. I'm open to correction as well. But that is something that India needs to sort of develop, because in other cities, in other countries, you have this kind of a metric or a sort of analysis being done quite often. But in India, we lack that because of varied reasons, because we don't collect data so often, nor do we sort of bring it out on a regular basis, or the kind of data that we collect is not really what we would need to estimate the GDP of a city. But that begs the question, why is it important to collect a city's GDP? That is the main thing that people ask me when I sort of reached out to the ministry for data.
Yeah.
And it's obvious that if you want to sort of see how cities are panning out over time, what actually is contributing to a city, we will say Hyderabad, Bangalore are hubs of tech.
Yeah.
Certainly, tech is driving, but then that leaves out a vast amount of population that comes in as migrants.
Yes.
So, is it the IT services or IT enabled services, or is it the informal sector that contributes to the city? How do we know that?
Yeah.
Unless we sort of analyze what exactly is the GDP pattern in a city, it's difficult to say that.
Yeah.
And based on that, it would be easier for us to sort of frame policies where we can address the informalization of workforce that happens.
Okay.
And that is something we miss in India. For instance, I'll give an example or an anecdote today. While I was in my IndiaSpend role, there was a chance of I came across a data set which talked about the building and construction workers.
Yeah.
So we have apps for that. We have a sort of a portal where people sort of they can upload and count and sort of register themselves on a portal, which sort of classifies them that they are working in under the building as a building and construction worker. So this kind of a thing is there, but to actually sort of give them the right benefits and to see what is exactly coming out in a city, whether they are actually able to fend for themselves or there is a need for government support at a certain level, it would need this kind of city level analysis to actually understand and frame policies in short. So this is one thing that sort of always makes me question whether the analysis that we do or the narrative that we have about our cities is sort of enough, or is it going in the right direction? And it's not just that cities are, for instance, if you all have read the book called The Triumph of the City by Professor Edward Lesser of Harvard University.
Yeah.
He points out a very interesting thing that city is the future. So if in India we all feel that we see that there is a rapid urbanization movement going on. But if we look at the data, it comes to a question that okay, only 34% of the cities of the population is in urban areas as per the 2011 census. But what after 21? So there would be an interesting thing to look at here because after the pandemic, quite a lot of people moved back to their homes in search of other labor and particularly the migrant workers. So the idea there is that okay, if they have gone back, are they willing to come back?
Yeah.
If they're willing to come back, what drives them? What would drive that?
Yeah.
So to sort of for policymakers also to analyze, I think it's a big time economists stepped in and sort of ask these kind of questions where we sort of give importance to our cities and we better give importance because the kind of lifestyle that we all sort of feel in our cities is not commensurate with the kind of services that we sort of require.
Yeah.
So for instance, poor public transport, poor pedestrian facilities, or sort of inadequate, I would say, uh, civic governance issues that pay. So these kind of things sort of make me more spiritual and sort of passionate, sort of to take up these kind of things from economic lens.
Okay.
And that is what is I found that is my life purpose in one sense at this stage. In one sense,
surely looks like you're passionate about it. I find you're very passionate about it. So it looks like it's your life's purpose.
And there is also these kind of things are it's more about I mean if I look at it, if I sort of talk to people in the econ world, I sometimes find it difficult to sort of look at the way people look at cities. Is either is it it's as a part of a city looked at in terms of let's say a Dharavi slum is studied or a particular part of Delhi is studied where there's all these jhopadis and slums, etc. But we need to look at it as an entire whole. So
Yeah.
both these factors influence how cities grow ultimately.
Yeah.
So there are rich people as well as poor people. The question is how do you bring about a balance?
Yeah.
So that is something I believe and is something that people need to look at from in their convo. And if you were to ask me what would be my PhD idea about or a topic that I would want to take up my question, it's precisely in a simple terms it would be this: to understand how macroeconomic factors influence a city's growth.
Yeah.
Because we always find that cities are sort of okay. Well, let's take the past example. The 1991 reforms that P.V. Narasimha Rao had brought in India directly had an impact on the tech services and IT-enabled services being in a major listing. But what stopped their growth in certain areas? In certain cities grew and certain cities fell.
Yeah.
For instance, cities like Hosur, it's a small city, but it's still a vibrant city in terms of it's still growing now and it's cloud. But what explains Hosur being at a lower level than in Bangalore?
Yeah.
So these kind of things can only be understood from macroeconomic perspective. And that's what I feel, and that's what I would love to take up as
Okay.
my PhD area.
Okay.
And
Wonderful. It's fascinating to me. I don't know if others are interested in it, but I'm as interested in it as you are because the future is in the cities. There's just no way around it. The present may be in the villages, but you are going to be there around 60 years more, 70 years more. And Tamil Nadu is almost 50% urban now. And Tamil Nadu is the way forward, not Bihar. It's in fact the Biharis are moving to the south because Bihar doesn't. So they are getting urbanized not in Bihar, they're getting urbanized in South India. And same
uh,
thing with Odisha, if not urban in Odisha, but the population is moving to the urban centers. So we are going to get urbanized one way or the other because we have free movement of labor and labor will move to the cities, not to another village in another state. So the migration pattern further will be responsible for urbanization. It's not just the growth of the population locally. In fact, if you look at the population growth data, you will find that the big cities' growth rate is far more than the India's national population growth rate,
yes,
far
absolutely,
more. And in
absolutely.
the state also, if you look, the top 5, 10 cities, their growth rate is astounding in population.
Right.
And that's because there's migration, right? Okay, I'm convinced, but anything else you want to add?
So there is one pointer that I come about after the pandemic. I had encountered a professor of mine who had told me about this, that isn't there a case for deurbanization, which is that due to the pandemic, but primarily, but also due to the kind of facilities that we see in our city these days in terms of crowding and inadequate transport, inadequate pollution. Delhi, for instance. I don't want to single out Delhi; it's a good city, but still, it's a problem that we can't ignore. So the question then was that uh, what is sort of what could be a possible cause for these kind of things? So for the layman out there, deurbanization is basically the reverse of urbanization. The people refuse to live in cities; they would want to come back to the villages or in the periphery of cities, sort of avoid these kind of congestion problem or high cost of living. And to an extent, if we see in major cities, it's already in vogue to an extent. We don't see that at a large level, but at a micro level, if we take a few cities, we find that to be the case because the kind of cost of living that we are seeing, it just makes it unaffordable for people within the city to remain living in the city. They would want to come outside on the periphery of the cities and live there by building farmhouses or by living in gated communities and commute to work or sort of take up these. But the trend is broadly for amongst those who are at a higher income level, but not necessarily at the low income level, because the low income level would want to sort of use the transport network to travel back and forth.
Yeah.
Because that is available in abundance, though not at a very good pace in our cities. So I'll give an example of Hyderabad or even in Chennai. So to an extent, these cities have certain urban pockets which are like exorbitantly high rents. So they can't, it's just unaffordable for them to stay there. So they would want, they're coming out and outside the, say, 10 to 15 kilometers outside the central business district and sort of building up their villas or, it's a very distorted picture that we have
Yeah.
and of the urbanization. So this is a trend that is also something which as economists, we will need to take note of, because it would then mean that as we grow, these pockets would also be ultimately brought into a city perimeter, and they sort of exclude sort of this kind of a thing will happen the more we urbanize in just one pocket of the city or in one city.
Mhm.
And therefore, as opposed to smart cities, which is talking about 100 smart cities with 100 crore every year, and not in beyond that, we need to sort of look at urbanization as a need to build more cities than just sort of make existing cities face the brunt of all these population explosion, transport ineffectiveness, these kind of things. I would like to add that economists will need to take more note of this kind of trends that we are seeing underway,
Mhm.
and more Indian-centric models we need to develop. And that is something I'm on that mission as well.
Okay.
Luckily, if I do a PhD, maybe I would be able to sort of understand how to sort of bring us about in a more Indian sense, because
Yeah.
India needs these kind of things. And the way West developed their cities is not necessarily a model, but it's certainly worthy of emulating for the simple reason that they sort of knew how to sort of not only organically help cities develop, but also plan accordingly that, okay, this is the problem, and we need to face this, and solutions have to be brought in accordingly. So
Yeah.
that is something we lack because of the kind of diverse governance setup that we have. There are certain departments that are needed to sort of manage the cities, do not manage it because they say it's not in their domain.
Yeah.
They pass it on to another, they pass the buck
Yeah.
to somebody else. So this is something that we need to think about. So an economist, when it comes to economics, it has to you have to look at it from the perspective of opportunity costs of ignoring cities in economics. That is something we have to face in the coming days. That is something I would love to go further on. And towards the end, I would say that in the last couple of since my graduation and the post graduation, this kind of questions did come about, and along with this, it's something I would want to put out for the account community, which are, and I'm sure there are many like me who are sort of confused at times earlier in the past that whether what they were doing was right or wrong. But time will tell what is really for instance, I found that cities are my passion only after going through all of this. So, in these kind of things, our mental health gets into a fix. We're not really able to sort of handle those kind of pressures. But then I think we should persist to find what is our right calling and take it up accordingly. So, to sort of borrow the economic jargon, I would say that the benefits of being in in this kind of situation, they certainly have a certain cost that we have to bear in terms of society, everything, people around us, and peer pressure. People are doing this job, that job, some are doing a PhD. But still, I think we need to find our calling and go according to what our template. There's no
Okay.
template out for us, but we have to set it out.
All right. Wonderful. Okay. I think let's end it here today, and we'll come back to you in a year to see how you have managed to clarify your mind. So unless you have something else you want to add.
That is the last thing, and of course, I
Yeah.
just wanted. This is something I missed out on earlier, but I
Yeah.
would like to say that as part of all this pandemic cycles and all, even I had started a podcast back in 2020 with my friend and who is now a journalist in Bangalore, and working in Deccan Herald. The podcast name is Seedhi Baat, the youth podcast, where we brought in a lot of people, youth from different dimensions and countries, to talk about what they wanted in terms of investments or a lot of things. So these kind of things are something that kept me going and sort of made me discover that the world is much more than what we have in terms of just equations and
Yeah.
software and modeling.
Okay. All right.
I mean,
Wonderful. Thank you so much for this, Pavan. Let's say bye now, and I'm sure we'll catch up with you in a year or so to see how you are doing and what you have achieved. Till then, let's say bye to the viewers. I'll be back with another young Indian or an expert soon. So bye, everyone.
thanks a lot, Dr. Mathu, for this.